Well, some people's 7 out of 10 creative is another person's 10 out of 10 creative.
Right.
Someone's 1 out of 10 creative is someone else's 10.
Yeah.
And learning where you've got to pitch yourself. And the boss I had before my current one, we always used to talk about which version of me do you want? Do you want Gregor, or Gregory? And Gregory was rolled out for when we think it was suits and ties, and when it needed to be a bit more sincere. Gregor's somewhere in between, and Greg's when we want to have a laugh with it.
Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Cool. Thank you for having me.
It is all about creative minds. The reason we came up with the podcast is quite a selfish excuse. I wanted to pick other creatives' brains about their process so I could kind of just learn and improve the creative process at BearJam, see if I can pick up any techniques. It was originally, just have a chat with a few people I know. That then turned into, why don't we record it? Then that turned into, why don't we film it? Here we are in a studio doing a, all bells and whistles podcast.
Well, nice. It feels suitably bougie, and I'm very happy to be on. Gutted not to be the first one, obviously, but I'll take being second to be asked. But
I just noticed it says episode 1 on our little box there. Episode 2. Otherwise, we could have snuck you in to be the pilot. Never mind.
Also, we're non-compete, aren't we? So if I do tell you anything you nick, it's not going to come back and bite me.
Yeah. Well, we sometimes collaborate.
Nice.
But anyway, we're in the studio. Shame we're not in the pub, which is perhaps where it would have been if it was just the two of us. But
to be fair, it is cooler in here, which is a touch.
True.
Really well air. Like the aircon in here is fantastic, actually. Red
It's
in
nice,
London. Yeah. For a hairy gentleman, this is vital. Continue. Yeah.
So to kick us off, Greg, just tell me a little bit about where you are in your career and the path to get there, because I know it wasn't necessarily a traditional creatives route.
No, it's actually more of a traditional creative to PR route, which we're seeing like less of now, actually. But so I'm creative director at Mischief, which is the consumer arm of MHP Group, which is part of Next 15. So we're a big old comms industry behemoth giant. There's loads of people. We range from everything from corporate comms to public affairs to consumer, and such was the pandemic. Also, lots of health too. So that's where I'm at now. Before then, I was at an agency called Ready 10, which was again a traditional PR agency, but with a lean towards sort of SEO. But I think as they've grown, they've sort of grown out of the SEO bit a little bit more, and that was my sort of first proper only creative route. Before then, I was at Synergy, which was a sports marketing company, who again, they were a creative sports marketing company, but I was an account director there, and then I got a creative stuck in the front of it because they recognised that. And then before that, it was 6 years at Frank, which is, I think, where I realised that I loved the creative side of it, because they poignantly, until very recently, refused to have a creative director because they were of the opinion that this whole agency is creative, and therefore not everyone, they sort of had an equal creative route. And eventually I persuaded them that not all creatives are equal and that there should be a creative at the coming through. That's when it came through. And then I started my career at Blue Rubicon, who are now Teneo, which was a corporate PR company. And
Okay, quite a change.
Yeah, that was a weird change. And I think looking back on it, I don't think I should have been 21 years old working in corporate PR. It was I'm barely grown up enough now at 35, but at 21 I was definitely not grown up enough. But
yeah, I can't imagine the 21-year-old Greg.
Yeah, it's like this, only marginally less hairy, but everything else is basically sort of the same. But no, it was great. That's why I cut my teeth. So you learn a lot about storytelling in corporate PR and how comms, especially at the very highest level, can really influence an entire business's performance, all the way through to like Frank and Mischief, who are a lot more consumer based. And so the experience I've got from a creative side of things is seeing how creative works in loads of different settings. And I think that's if I was to pat myself on the back for anything, it's that I can be serious, I can be silly, I can be funny. I think that's reflective of the background I've had.
Right, because you've seen it from a number of different sides.
Yeah, and it's about finding out what some people's 7 out of 10 creative is another person's 10 out of 10 creative.
Right.
What someone's 1 out of 10 creative is someone else's 10.
Yeah.
And learning where you've got to pitch yourself. And the boss I had before my current one, we always used to talk about which version of me do you want? Do you want Greg, Gregor, or Gregory? And Gregory was rolled out for when we think it was suits and ties, and when it needed to be a bit more sincere. Gregor's somewhere in between, and Greg's when we want to have a laugh with it. And I sort of found that if mischief is Greg, MHP is much more Gregory, and I level out at Gregor, but
Yeah.
probably my least favourite of the name variants you can have there. But
Who have we got today?
I think you're going to have predominantly Greg, but if you
Great.
ask me like a serious one, I'll give you a smidge of Gregor.
Okay.
And Gregory is very rarely seen on a Friday,
Right. Okay.
unless we
Why
need to
is,
say.
why is a Monday guy?
Yeah. Gregory's very Monday.
Yeah. Fair enough. So, I mean,
He's often furious at Friday, Greg, as well. Like,
what? Oh, yeah. Well, did you see what Greg did on?
yeah, we think, well, what Greg didn't do on Friday tends to be more the favourite. Yeah.
So, a kind of a long-ish, varied career. Feels like just getting started though. When creative director, I know Mischief described themselves as a creative PR agency.
Yeah.
So they obviously put the emphasis on creative. Does that, and you're, creative director at the top of that pyramid. Does that come with pressure?
Yeah, it does, because I think it should do. And it's like, especially, look, if you're called a creative PR agency and you're not creative, you'll get found out pretty quick.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does. It's like, but at the same time, like, I'm quite confident in, I'm confident in my own ability, having cut my teeth for however long. So you've sort of got to back yourself a little bit. So yeah, it's like with pressure comes, but I felt pressure a lot more when I was younger. And what I find like managing younger creatives really interesting is they're still at that stage where like, yeah, this really could go wrong, and like you see stuff go wrong. So whereas I feel like I've seen a lot go wrong, and therefore I'm less worried about stuff. So the pressure comes down a notch. I find I now have a different sort of pressure, which is like I really want like the guys and girls that I manage to be really, really good. And I sort of like you get managed alongside that rather than the ideas you come up with. Because I think by the time you reach the level of creative director, you should have probably had a few good ideas in your time. And then the reason you're a creative director, not a creative, is you're meant to be fostering an environment and people to get up to a standard that you want that's reflective of an agency that calls itself a creative agency. And so there's pressure, but I don't feel it on my shoulders so much as you must come up with ideas.
Yeah.
I find
Okay.
it.
Because you're putting that on the juniors.
Well, yeah,
now.
well, you should.
You must come up with the
it's
ideas.
Like, it's just like, here, have my pressure. Like it's, but no, that's how I learn. And I think I get this feedback a lot about me, is to let it go a little bit more. And it's bizarre because I always felt I was given really loose. I was given what's the phrase? I was given free rein, especially at Frank.
Yeah.
They let you very young make your own mistakes and go through. And I remember occasionally feeling a bit exposed by that, but actually long term, I really benefited from that in terms of where you cut your teeth. Same at somewhere like Ready 10, which it was like had a very sort of, when I was there, had a real sort of startup mentality. And that meant with the type of clients you had a lot more freedom to express yourself and come through. And when I was there, we won McDonald's, which was like an amazing moment for this agency. But I remember thinking like we'd pitched this in a very not McDonald's-y way. It felt like it was very true to us. And so it's different. You get different sort of pressures as you go through. Like I don't lie up or lie awake thinking about my job in that respect. I just really like it.
That was going to be my next question. Do you still like it? Do you love it? Like, does it?
So I vote, like, of course, like I wouldn't be. I think, like, look. So what am I? I'm 30. I'm 35 now. I still am rarely out energied in a room. Like I think that's a responsibility you sort of have to bring the energy and come through, and that can be like a high energy or it can be a calming energy, and you go through it. I without getting too deep on it, like I had like a really nasty health scare last year, and I remember coming out of that and being like, oh, why do I still care about this Robert Dias pitch when I nearly died? And it's like, actually, that's really good that I still care about this Robert Dias pitch. It's like, I must really like my job, and that's great. And I think I vibe off other people liking it. Do you know what I mean? It's like just before we got in this room, I've just seen that our Cardo team have got a load of coverage on the Daily Mail, and like there is a team, they are bouncing off each other. And I vibe off that as much as I do like vibe with success. It's like one thing I speak to one of my peers about a lot is sometimes you get promoted beyond the thing you're best at. And so my thing has always been like, I love coming up with ideas, and that's the thing. And it's like, and actually, the higher you come up, the less ideas you come up with, and the more fostering of other people you do. And I just I like setting a standard for it. I like it's constantly evolving. Like obviously, we're talking a lot at the moment about the value of AI in creativity and what that means. And I just there isn't a world where you can convince me that AI is going to take over human ideas. Because one, I think you can do a provenance job on it anyway and say that our ideas are handcrafted or made from. You basically say these are organic ideas, like made from genuine humans, and I think you'll get it there. But it's just like you just can't convince me. AI has no lived experience, and so it can replicate. But all you're ever going to get is inauthenticity, and so I don't feel that fear from it because it's such a human industry we work in, and so.
So I just want to pick up on ideas. Where can you talk me through where you get your ideas? What's your process?
So it varies. So I'm process light because I think you should be like I've seen amazing ideas come from really well structured brainstorms. I've seen some of the best ideas come from someone was in a bath or on the toilet and they came out. It's like, oh my God, I've got this great idea. And you're like, oh my God, how'd you come up with it? It's like, right, so I was staring at the bathroom floor. I'm like, yeah, of course you were, right. So you go through. So no, there is a process. But I think it's more important to know what a good idea is and how that makes you feel.
Okay, let's start there. So what in PR? Let's keep it on PR. What is a good PR idea?
So in its purest sense, a good idea is something that makes you feel something. And like I like talking about we talk about like emotional levers. Like we used to talk about personal, emotional, and surprising, which was something, but emotional is such a strong word. But like if it's just like when you've seen it, and it's just like it either makes you think about something a bit differently, it excites you, makes you laugh, makes you cry, makes you laugh. It's just like a good idea if it makes you feel. Now, it's absolute chorus sense. A good idea could be a solution to something. And that's it. It's pure sense, but like we're not always making solutions for stuff. Sometimes you're just there just to make someone laugh, and therefore I think it's a good idea if it makes you feel something, and that can be differently. Even if it makes you feel angry, I think it might be a good idea as long as it was meant to make you feel angry, and it wasn't meant to make you laugh, and now you're furious. It's like that would be a disaster. But like that's it in its purest sense. I think you've got something good when it makes you feel something.
And what's the best way to get to that then? If you're not sat on the bog looking at the floor.
No, so I think you need to have I think it's more important to have a sign-off process than an ideation process, if you know what I mean. So it's a case of in PR as well, we have to think about where it's going to go. So it's slightly different to advertising creative, where advertising creative or marketing creative, your stuff is going to get seen, because you're going to pay for a slot or you're going to pay for a print coverage. It's going to get seen. If you're in PR, there's a chance you could come up with an idea that doesn't get seen. So you have to think about it from a channel point of view as well. So it has to be, is this intended for the front page of The Sun? Is this intended for Sport Bible? Is this social first? And everything else comes from that. So you have to think, we have one extra sign-off point, which is it going to get approved by whoever it is that holds the door,
that gatekeeper, for whether it's an editor,
exactly,
or whoever. Okay.
So that's the extra bit sign-off process that goes into PR. It's just like, this is a lovely idea, but is it newsworthy? Is it something that's going to make you stop and write about it and quick concept? That's really important. Process-wise, we've got a good brainstorming culture. I'm a big fan of putting people into pairs. I like creative pairs. I picked that up from a guy called Mark Lewis at the School of Communication Arts in Brixton. I just saw them doing it and it was really effective. And as someone who's quite extroverted and loud, it's like I try and pair people with extroverts and introverts so they speak to each other, so you don't have people shouting in the room. I also think that's a really good way of, if you've got someone who I would call is quietly creative, who needs to think about it, they don't get drowned out by someone like me who likes to think out loud. And so you pair it off, you send them away, they come back and they pitch and present to each other. And I think
so you might have one brief and then a couple of different pairs working on the same brief and then bring them back together.
Exactly that. And I think if you're and then you pitch at your peers, and especially important in PR because again, you need to be as good as the junior or the account executive or the account manager that's still speaking to the media. And that's my biggest creative fear, is that I lose touch of what the what's happening in the media world to go in, because I mean you might have seen this a little bit, but there was a period in like the early tensies where actually even unless it's more modern, let's say it's from 2010 to 2015 and a little bit beyond that, media was saying to us like, oh, give us video content is news, just give us really good video content. And now you can't just sell in a video, like it has to be story, like it's basically there isn't that video editing job on the Mirror sites as much anymore.
Yeah.
So you make really good content still, but that tends to be more for social, not straight for editorial.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved from those times, I think. So yeah, something that we see in the kind of and part of that is like how branded something is.
Yeah.
Has changed as well, I think, in that period.
No, it's interesting. So the peer-to-peer bit is really important in PR, because I might have come up with this really lofty idea that would have got a shed load of coverage in my time, but now I need someone to say to me like, Greg, like that won't work anymore. Like this journalist needs this journalist needs this, so we need to tweak the idea like that.
Yeah.
And so the peer review part of creativity becomes like really important, because you've got to convince your peers that it won't end in being told to bugger off by a journalist, or worse.
I think a big struggle with PR, and something that I always feel sorry for the PR people when, you know, they've got a great idea, great concept, great campaign, deliver it, but then the news agenda shifts. There's been a big story lands, and however good the campaign piece was, oh no, we've had to wipe it. It's off the agenda because we've got to talk about this.
Yeah, no, we had it. Like Margaret Thatcher dying once ended a couple of $100,000 campaign for me, which was, it felt very anti-Thatcher, that, because she's quite pro-business, but really, yeah, shattered it. Client was left wing though, so maybe she got her, but like it was like. But no, it happens, and it's like, and I've seen it happen in like the dirtiest of ways, when you've just been really, really unlucky. Like, yeah, pray for anyone that had a showbiz story this week, and it's like Schofield's now had like 2 solid weeks of, that means 2 solid weeks of you not talking, like Coronation, another one like that. I'm going to shamelessly nick a phrase from a guy called Nick Russell, but he referred to it as mayhem, where May has been absolutely appalling, like in terms
mayhem
of
like that.
Yeah, it is good, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, actually, that was mine. It's just like, it was carnage. Like, you had Coronation into a home Eurovision, into Schofield, into there was also the point of politics paralysis, where you literally couldn't get stuff away. There was no other news other than which prime minister is messed up now, and that it can hit you like more often than not. Like, if you're dealing in consumer goods, there's always more room in the paper and there's always more news and going through. It's just like there can be times when it's tight. And because the journalist pool is shrinking, you will find that more journalists are writing about 3 or 4 subjects rather than 1 or 2. And so a big news story can take out your consumer editor, because they've got to do the consumer view on what does this big political thing mean for the consumer, rather than what does this lovely fluffy consumer campaign mean about, we've just made a giant chocolate Easter bunny and put it in a village called Bunny in Nottingham.
Yeah.
And, it's like, and you don't want to cover this anymore because we've got a new Prime Minister.
That. Nice.
Yeah, it was
nice
really
piece.
good, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily, we were perfect for the and finally section.
Okay.
There. So it worked nicely. So after having been told like everything is awful and doom, 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 and finally there's a giant chocolate bunny in Nottingham, and you're like, yay! Like
So when you're working on the creative idea, I guess you need to have that, as well as knowing like where's it intended for, getting the timing right, and having that visibility of, okay, Eurovision's coming, it's not related to that, but that's going to be dominating. How do we navigate that?
Yeah,
I guess it's just something else to throw in the mix.
Yeah, and like you mitigate for it, but it's just like you also make like some judgment calls. It's like there is media space for more than one story, and so you can mitigate. But like, say for example, if you had a press release about something music related, and it was launching the week of Eurovision, I think you should be advising your client to maybe not launch it that week, and let's go straight after, because Eurovision's like, it's a weekend and then it's gone.
Yeah.
So you could delay that and you can go each way. It's the things you've got to be more careful about are just what's the word, best way of putting it? It's just like, is not putting a time limit on that you don't have to that you don't strictly have to adhere to. And I don't think you see we see that a lot with client behaviour, but also PR agencies are guilty of it, where it's just like, this must run now this week. Whereas actually we see it more and more. Sell-ins have got. Sorry, when I say selling, I'm referring to the act of like getting your story to media. It's
calling the journalist.
Yeah, calling the journalist.
The hard work.
Doing the hard haggle sort of thing. I don't like calling it a sell-in though, because it implies it's a sales exchange. When actually, if we've done our job right, it's what they want.
They should be biting your hand off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's no money exchanged, so it's like it's not really sell. But that's the phrase. And I've noticed that they've got a little less time sensitive. And so if a story, it used to be like, if it's you've put it out on a Monday and it didn't land on a Tuesday, therefore this story is now dead. Whereas more often than not now, it's just because, again, it's a timing thing. It's journalists will hold a story, find a new hook for it. And so I'll give you a really lovely example. We did an idea for Ocado, which was, we basically got, they're really big. They've got a fantastic record on sustainability and food waste. And we did this whole idea about using the dregs of your food and turning it into gourmet meals for birds. And
for birds,
yeah. So it's
nice.
Really cute. You got like, obviously, like you got little tiny plates with like we'd been food arted to make, and we knew.
What's the obsession with PR with either making tiny things or massive things?
You play to your audience. Journalists love big to small.
Yeah,
like things.
Okay.
People go mad for it. Like, it's like, but these were cute. Actually, some of them were quite big, but like, you got the gist. But we did it with the RSPB. Hang on, no, I've given them an extra B. Just the RSPB.
Yeah.
How many birds were there? No, just bees. Just bees. And we timed it with the Great Bird Count, which is an RSPB initiative to basically be like, and you count it. And we got loads of coverage in line with that. And then but then 3 weeks later, we were still getting coverage for it because we had it in our heads. It'd be so great to partner with the RSPB and link this up with the Great Bird Watch and. Media were like, yeah, Birdwatch was a nice touch, but it's just spring, isn't it? Like, and you're just like, yeah, no, it is just spring. And so it kept on having that longevity. So you can force yourself into a corner a little bit with a time where you sometimes don't have to.
Yeah.
And you mitigate against it. But yeah, as a general rule, you try and avoid, like, you know when something mass and mainstream is happening, and you try and give that a bit of a wide breadth. But other than that, you should be confident that you're timing it right, not worried about what everyone else is doing.
So, Greg, what would you say makes you a good creative?
Every day, no, I don't know. I think there's a couple of things. There's a couple of things that I think background-wise are quite nice. Like I think I've had a very like mixed upbringing where I've been both. I've spent I've had times where I've been like in like really nice settings where like I lived with my nan for a bit and they lived in a big house in the countryside and I had a very idyllic rural upbringing, and then my mum's always lived in the centre of London, and that was different. I remember I've had everything from like I've basically, if you think about it in terms of baked beans, I've had everything from Heinz homegrown to special ones to the Sainsbury's value ones, which at the time were like economy white stick with the blue ribbon around the side. And it just means that I've seen quite a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And like from being like, it gives you quite a unique take on at least like the human experience. So I think I'm quite a good empath and I can relate to people quite well, and if I don't, I then take a lot of pride in making sure that I'm well read, and like, so that's something I think I'm really good at. But I think I've got better at this as I've got older. It's also recognizing that there are people around you who are better than you at other things, and shamelessly borrowing and stealing from them when you can, and going in. But like, I mean, look, we've worked together enough. Like, you should be able to tell me that as well.
Well, I did, knowing I was going to ask that, and I was going to try and weave it into the introduction, but then I thought I'll ask you. But yeah, I mean, my response to why is Greg good is I think you've got no ego, which I think is really important. I really like. And I guess that comes in when you say you don't mind collaborating, getting ideas from other people. I think you call it how it is, again, which is great. And that there is that side of you that I've seen, which it goes back to the baked beans. I think you're kind of a bit of a man of the people in a way. I think you're not in a kind of London bubble, you kind of seem to be a bit more worldly, which I think must be quite a strength for trying to, sell in stories that are going to be read in somewhere else.
I think, well, firstly, thank you. I'm now blushing, which is not ideal with this T-shirt, and if you're just listening to it, the T-shirt's pink. But yeah, no, I think it is. I'm glad you said that, because I hate the creative stereotype. Like, I'm not. We're in a studio in Hoxton. I'm not normally a skinny jean latte wearer at Hoxton.
Yeah.
I think like creativity, it's like, I think we've spoken about this with Can. I find it like, I don't need to be patted on the back by other creatives. I would like your nan to see it and be like, that was really clever, and like, they're the campaigns to me that matter. And like, I'd rather be told by, the best thing that's ever happened to me career-wise is not so much like these big award wins and stuff like that. It's when one of your mates puts it in a WhatsApp group who knows nothing about PR and be like, oh my God, did you see this thing that Just Eat did? It's like, this is really funny. I'm like, haha, that was me. And then they immediately hate it on principle. Like, so it was, so yeah, like, so I'm grateful you said that, because I think it's the thing that I do rate about myself. It's like, I very proudly take, and like, you also, like, if I allow me to be briefly woke, it's like, you also have a responsibility as a white bloke who is, like, by sort of accidental definition middle class. It's like, to make sure you're really well read, and so you do understand, like, you're never going to match lived experience, but you can do your very best to source from as many different sources as humanly possible to help inform your idea. And I think the campaign I got the most, I think it's the single most awarded I've ever done, was a campaign which was to help the LGBTQIA plus community. And the reason I'm so proud of that is because of the amount of work that went into, can we please make sure we're not getting this wrong? And it wasn't just a case of asking, right, after two gay guys in the office, it was a case of really making sure you teach, because it's like look, you see it from, like, you've got Douglas Murray, who is an openly gay man, who is slightly right of most horrible dictators, and he thinks a certain way, to what I would represent, like, to someone like Joe Lycett, who is also gay. And like, I think you can fall into a massive trap of grouping people as the same. And even within subgenres and subsections and other demographics, there's so many variants that you've got to really work hard and be well read to appreciate them all. And even then, you might not get it right. But the best you can do is try.
Yeah, and if you're saying, the best campaigns and ideas are the ones that spark emotion, you need to know the audience, don't you? And you need to understand how they think and what is going to spark that emotion.
And you can learn. That's the other thing that I occasionally get a bit frustrated when it's sort of like, the answer to diversity isn't always just like throw more diverse people at it. It's like, you can learn yourself, and you need to take those experiences on. But I don't like people to say like, oh, the solution to diversity is to get more diversity at every possible thing. It's like, that's one part of the solution. The other part of the solution is you train yourself, you read, you make sure that you do your own research. So when you are bringing in more diversity, you're not bringing it in for tokenistic purposes. You're bringing it in because you really are valuing the work that's gone into it, and you're valuing their experiences, and you're bringing it in. And I don't think that necessarily, I think that can be a really powerful way of doing really great work, is to, just crowdsource it. I don't know why you wouldn't. And I think that's the difference between being a creative and a creative director. If you source some stuff, like I said, like my creative black weak spot is tech related stuff. I've got one lad who works he's the one that's worked out how to use AI really well, and he's got been going through, and I've just got a little bit of it just doesn't interest me much. I've never been personally, I've never been a tech head. It's I've just about got a pair of AirPods now, and that's only because everyone had them, and I just felt like a bit of a lemming not having them.
Yeah, having wires.
Yeah, it was just I'm just there they work.
Don't lose them.
Yeah, and it's just whereas my passions or obsessions are in different places. So I've got a bit of a blind spot to tech, but that doesn't mean that we don't do tech ideas. It's it means you've got to work especially hard at tech.
That you can bring it in.
Yeah.
So I guess when just going back, when you would talk about your creative process, and you say you're not necessarily process driven, sounds like there is a part that is a bit of an immersion So
Yes.
is that the right word? Or is that the
Yeah, no, I knew what you meant. Yeah.
And, whether it's, doing something aimed at a particular community or section or, tech heads,
Yeah.
I guess there is a part of it that you just need to, what do you do? Just, you said reading a lot. Do you have to kind of take yourself away, bury yourself in a tribe and read about them, learn about them?
I think I've also, so you do a lot of that yourself, and you should do. Like I'm lucky I work with and have worked with like really good strategists as well. So I currently work with a guy called Dan Deeks Osborne who is brilliant, and he's a real like obsessive on research and storytelling. I mean, that before that, you would have met her, I'm sure, but like Lucy Hart, who is just, she's much more I would say she's more of a humanist strategist, in that she knows the human experience, and she sort of brings it in, and then would almost use stats to back it up afterwards, but you sort of get this essence of what's coming through. And so I think immersion is quite a good way of putting it, because you, especially if it's not in your sweet spot, you have to really, really try really hard to get into it. And I don't mind, like, if the situation calls for it, I don't mind doing focus grouping, but the reason I say I don't have a process is because, like, I don't think you can apply a process to every brief you get in, where you can apply a number of different techniques and tactics to a different brief. And I think that's probably the healthiest way of doing it, where you wouldn't do a focus group for a press office idea. You would do a focus group for maybe a big campaign idea that you don't know anything about.
Okay.
Like, I probably wouldn't focus group something on football.
When you say focus group, is that with members of the public?
Yeah, bring members of the public in. Like, so one thing, we've recently positioned ourselves as Mischief as a passion-powered agency. And so that basically means, rather than looking at demographics and saying, like, it's like the best line I've used to say is like, right, you are wearing a green shirt today. You are wearing a green shirt today, not because you are aged 24 to 40 and you are white male. You're wearing it because I like that shirt and that colour's worked well on me. You don't buy something because of your age range and whatever it is. You buy something because I like that. And so we tap more into passions and go things. So the way we start doing, so we set up something called the In Crowd, which is pockets of people that are passionate fans of something. And so, for example, we've had a gaming brief come in. We've now got we've got a gaming in crowd section, which ranges from like people that are your mum who likes playing Candy Crush and flicking like on the tube home, to hardened seasoned gamers who you can say to them like, look, this is the game. This is what's going on. What do you think of this? What do you think of it?
Nice.
And so they are experts in their field, but not traditional PR experts. They are with an agenda. They are normal people, and that is a really helpful way to do it. But you wouldn't apply that to everything. You wouldn't have to do it, and sometimes you can back yourself on your own knowledge. It's like I can smell when someone has done a football campaign and the creative is not a football fan. Like, I can get it like within a second. Like, I'll know. And it'll be
just a little.
There'll be something. Like, the word footy is a massive giveaway. If anyone says footy, I'm just like, right, you don't know what football is.
Yeah.
Like, I just assumed that you're wrong. And like, it's just like you'll get onto it. Like, my case in point best example is Puma did. I remember Puma doing a flash mob for Borussia Dortmund after they'd lost to Bayern Munich in the final here, which I think was 2013. And it's my favourite piece of disastrous content of all time, because you can tell what's happened. It's like, we were going to do the flash mob if they won and they didn't. Should we do the flash mob anyway? And it's just like, yeah. And it's like poetry how bad this content is, because like Jurgen Klopp's the manager of Dortmund at the time.
Right.
There's these guys just dancing in Stansted Airport. These players are devastated. They've just lost like the biggest game of it. Like, you can sort of see them. All their facial expression is just like, okay. And it was just like, Puma released it as if it was good, and you were just there like looking at it, just like, oh my god, that stinks of Shoreditch. And it was just like, oh no, oh no, oh no. And it's like, it released it, and all the comments on YouTube are still the same, always have been, of just like, why have you done this?
Yeah.
Like, the players are visibly pissed off. Like, it's absolutely.
You just wonder what that. Like, the amount of people that would have had to have seen it and signed it off.
Yeah.
You wonder
and
how
not
it
one
got
football
through.
person did.
Yeah.
And it's like, and you can tell that it's like I was speaking to a colleague who's black the other day, who just said like one black person would have caught that. And it's about sorry, no, I've got that story completely wrong. It was about KSI, and he used the P word on in one of his videos, and you were like, and they laughed about it and they got through, and say it was that piece of content were like, someone would have caught that. If someone should have caught that, and there was a power dynamic that's go through, and that's why crowdsourcing, even at a sign-off point of view, I think is really, really important to just make sure you don't clang it.
Yeah. How, talking of clangers, how do you deal with feedback that's, let's say you've come up with an idea, you've fostered it, you've worked it up, send it off to the client or someone else in the agency, and it's just negative feedback. How do you take that?
You blame your production partner. You say, God, that James at BearJam, what a nightmare. His idea. No, it's like, I think like...
Pass the buck.
Yeah, it's like, you blame.
Yeah.
You throw juniors under the bus as soon as you can. No, it's part of the job, isn't it? It's like you just... if you can't sell an idea, it's a bad idea. Or it's a good idea for someone else, but it's definitely not a good idea for the client who just decided they hate it. Like, now, again, if you speak to other creatives, they might tell you about this one time where they really fought for it and the client wasn't sure, but they pushed it through. That happens like once a year. Like, it's like, you'll know it. It's like you try and push back on a client, they're like, yeah, I just don't really like the idea though. And it's like everyone's got to be on board. And like I said, if someone whose main selling point is like energy, if someone's like not got the same enthusiasm for an idea, I go off it. And it's like, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think you need your client to be excited as you are, or at least in the same ballpark of excitement. So if someone's not bothered, you go, all right, then cool, we'll have another crack. But it's really important to know why they don't like it. And that's the bit that can be tricky, like, because you can have disagreements. And like, so for example, like Just Eat, I'll use as a working example because me and the client have spoken about this at length. Was like, I really felt that they probably should have done something for Eurovision. It felt like a big moment. Client just isn't a big fan of Eurovision. It just doesn't.
As the individual.
As the individual, but also, but like as a cultural point, thinks it's cheesy, doesn't think it's cool. And my argument was like, look at TikTok, like it's sponsoring Eurovision now. They're really trying to make this more of a youth thing. I think now is the time. And we eventually agreed that, like, she basically said, look, I see your point. I just don't think it's there yet. And I'm like, cool, that's fine by me. Like, that's a good discussion to have between.
Park all those ideas for next year.
Yeah, I'll park it or give it someone else. Like, it's just like that was a grown up, good relationship, which comes from a good client relationship. And I didn't throw my toys out of the pram. I respectfully said, I think like this is becoming more of a youth moment. You should consider it and be ahead of it.
But we're gonna do a giant.
It's fun. It's fine, and you kind of do. Like I have one or two in a career that spans like 10 years where a client didn't like the idea at the start, and I really, really fought for it. But you have those like maybe once a year where you're so convinced you're right, but you can be, you've just like, sometimes it's not worth having that fight. And it's like, I don't think you, and that's when creatives get a reputation for being precious. And so again, I'm really flattered that you said the thing about no ego, because like, I think that's really important. Like, I don't get emotionally attached to ideas. They're not my babies. They're my vehicle to do my job well. Like, and I think some people get that. Like, oh, it's my baby. I love this idea. I'm like, dude, it's like you work for a company, you don't even own it. Like, it's like, that's not your idea. Like, that is property of Mischief HQ, according to every legal paper that exists. Like, why be precious about it? It's a vehicle for you to do your job well. Do your job well. And if the client says they don't like an idea, like, then they don't like your idea. So find out why they don't like it and then adapt it and go through. Like, you'll rarely get an insight wrong. That's the thing, that it's like, if you get your insight right, then there's an execution to fall out about. Like, it's very like you've had a bit of a stinker if someone says, I have literally no idea what you're talking about. Like, that's not a true insight, or you've just made that up, or that's not been well researched or something. Like, that's a mistake. I think if you can do.
So that workflow at Mischief is, you've got the team looking at the insights, doing that research. They then come to you or the whoever it is in the more creative realm, be like, we've got this, can you run with it? And then you'll be like, okay, let's get a group together, let's work it out.
So it's all collaborative between the strategic and the creative bit. Like, so say, for example, it's like, if you have the strategy guys should be doing more of the work to get you towards the insights. But as a creative team, you should be coming up with insights as well, because you've got to shape how you write the idea and sell it into the client. And then the executional side of things becomes a bit more creative. But then I think good strategists should be able to go, here's my strategy, here's my insight, and here's how I think you could maybe turn it into an idea. And I'd be like, yeah, good, you should be able to do that, because if you've just done this bit and this bit and this bit, and then it's like, poof, over to you.
Yeah.
I suspect that bit isn't very strong. And so you sort of finish it off. And then similar from the creative point of view, if you jump straight to execution, what you'll probably end up with is something that's stunty, but not very clever or well thought out, or doesn't meet a target. And I think
that's what I was going to ask. Like, do you ever have to backwards engineer, because you've got a great execution, and I guess you've already answered it by saying it's stunty. It is then a stunt. Like, if you think of a great news hook or a picture piece or a little video idea, but there's nothing to back it up, do you try and find something to back it up, or do you just?
I think you can. Like, it depends. It depends on how strongly you feel about something. Like, I tend to. That happens more when you're like cold pitching or you're doing something for new biz. Like,
right.
Because I always think, like, if you're in a good new business pitch, the best new business clients or pitch runners in that way will appreciate that you're not going to nail it 100%, because you literally have had them. You've had them for maybe 2-3 hours in the pitch process. You've had a brief. You've answered a few questions. So good pitch runners will know that you're never going to nail it 100%. So it's as much important as showing you're working as it is. It's like it's GCSE maths. You get marks for showing you're working. You get marks for the answer, right? The answer you can sometimes get first, and then it's how you show you're working. Like, there is an idea I'm working on at the moment, which I absolutely adore, which was very much idea first, which was basically, I recently discovered after Paul O'Grady died, the language of Polari, which is basically a language that gay men especially used to use to avoid detection, like when they were going about Soho. And it's like, some phrases you will have heard are still used. It's basically gay Latin now. So stuff like zush is a Polari word. So if you zush something up, it's there. Donna Avada, like me dolly, me duck. Like, there's little. After we've done this, I'll show you in the dictionary. But there's loads. And I was there like, God, this could be a great Pride idea, because it basically faded out. But like Julian Clary, for example, big user of it, and like it's really popular in drag, and it gets used a lot in that coming through. There's a beer called Polari, for example, that's served in like loads of gay bars and stuff like that. So it's got this massive like cultural resonance heritage. I'm like, loads of people don't know what it is. There are younger gay guys who don't know what it is because they've never had to use it. And there's increasingly more of a historical appreciation for the struggle that came before in the gay community. So they're like, I've got a glorious something here. We should do a campaign about Polari, and then it's just like, right, then you start working it back from who can we sell this to?
Right.
Because it's like, right, I don't think you can turn Just Eat's menu into Polari because it hasn't got all those words. It's a little bit risky because a lot of the words are sexualized. And so, for example, cottaging is a Polari phrase that's come through. So it needs a grown-up client that's willing to put a bit of educational spin on it. And then we started getting into translation. And so we're like, oh, this could be fun. What about Duolingo? What about like Amazon and Alexa? And the way we're doing it now is we're trying to work a way to make it work for Alexa. So you can speak Polari to Alexa and Alexa will speak Polari back to you. Or you could do like a little speech in Polari so you can see it going. But it's just like, that was an example of an idea that started at the idea phase, and then it's just like, right, how can you run it back?
So do you kind of just go through your day to day, Greg, with your eyes open, collecting little things?
That's really,
they go in a drawer somewhere, and then you might pull them out when the right brief or client or project comes in.
Yeah, and everyone's got their sweet spot, right? And it's like, and I like uncovered gems, like, and I think they work really well for media as well. Like, it's little things like, if you go on the BBC News website, you'll see that there's all the serious news, and then there's always like third or fourth best read on the site is a fun human interest story. That's typically PR gold there. And there's some things that just like work. Like, it's you'll see an annual fill a pothole campaign. Yeah. Always works. Like, thing that I am obsessed with is village Facebook groups. It's like, if you want to know what England is thinking, join a village Facebook group. And England is thinking, someone needs to fix the pothole. My reception is bad. I don't want a phone mask to make the reception better.
Yeah.
the three things that are driving this country.
Yeah, and I don't want the roadworks to fix the pothole.
Yeah, the roadworks. Oh, the roadworks are here to fix the pothole, the bastards. And, and it's just like, and you just watch it unfold. And you just like, oh my god, there's so much. There's so many ideas on here. You're going through like, you should just give yourself as diverse a source point. Like I sort of say to the lads, like, be like creative magpies. Like if you see something shiny, like pick it up and see what the crack is, and like dive into it a little bit more, get a bit obsessed by something, and then like the more you're obsessed by something, the more you'll be able to flex an idea to it because you'll understand it so much more.
Yeah.
Because you've dived into it. It's like Wikipedia wormholes are a good creative technique where you're just there like, oh my god, there's so much here. Where you go all the way through. Like I saw it's little things. Like I saw McDonald's did a campaign I really liked the other week, which I think was either Ready 10 or it came directly from McDonald's. I didn't see, but they got Alan Shearer recreated a McDonald's advert.
Yeah, it was Ready 10.
Yeah, it was like it was really good.
Yeah,
and I was just there like someone has had the knowledge, and I think it was suggested it might have been Shola Amiobi, but to know that that advert was 25 years ago, and like so therefore this will definitely work.
So recreated the Alan Shearer advert from 25 years ago.
Yeah, and so it's just like so someone's had a blinder there, and that is where most ideas come from. Where it's like like the best. My favourite serious campaign we did at Mischief was
jumping the gun. I was going to ask you favourite. No,
I'll shut it.
So Greg, favourite idea.
Oh, what a seamless segue! Like, so I was just thinking about this, but it's probably something we did for Asda, and it was called Delivering Kindness, and it was what I really liked about it was it won 3 awards, which were like the COVID Campaign of the Year award. So we are always going to have that. That's a forever title, like, unless it comes back again, but it'll be called something else by then. But so we're still the COVID title champion holders.
Great,
forever ad nauseum. And it was based on an insight that, like, someone just said, like, the only person I've seen all week is my delivery driver. And, like, it just went, ping, and you were like, wow, that Asda's delivery drivers are like the people on the ground, man. Like, that's unbelievable. Like, so we did a whole campaign around coaching their delivery drivers to spot the signs of loneliness. And we relaxed, and it went all the way up. The reason I like it so much, it went all the way up Asda's, like, what's the word, a commercial operation. Like, so they have really strict delivery target times, and they relaxed them a bit so you could allow some time for a chat. And so they were wearing badges that had was it happy to chat on. So there was this sort of clear vocal dialogue, clear cue that if you were been on your own for however long, which was very true for loads of people, who, especially if they were what's the word? I've forgotten what the word was called. What was it called when you were especially locked away?
Oh, like
shielding. That was it. Yeah. So if you're shielding, like delivery driver was the word. I'm so relieved I've forgotten the word shielding. Like that.
Blocked it out.
Yeah, I think that and unprecedented to go.
Yeah.
And it was magic, right? Like, it was really, really lovely, and it like this campaign absolutely banged, and it just came from one person saying, I saw my delivery driver. And then I remember this idea getting pieced together by so many different people. And being like, they should do some training with the Royal Voluntary Service because they specialise in loneliness. And then it was like, someone at Asda said, let's speak to
just
MPs.
Really gain momentum.
Yeah, and it just go. And it was Asda CEO launched it on his personal Instagram account. And so you're there like, that was buff. And that was really, but I would love to have told you there was this like amazingly thought out process. It was literally someone came in and said, that's the first person I've seen, and it just set everyone off. And so, yeah.
I guess because the process is probably so ingrained in you, it doesn't feel like a process. It's like it's got to a level and it's like instinctive.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think your ears and your eyes should be open, right? And it's like and you should treat yourself to as many different sources as you can, and variety should be spiced, and if on the off chance that there are young creative people listening, that is like the one bit of advice I will always hold.
Have you read these questions?
No, is that what it is?
No, it's just the classic.
Do you want to segue?
So, Greg, any advice for younger creatives?
I was just thinking about this as it happens. It's like, that is my wide source material. Like, good creatives are exceptionally good in their sweet spot, and they know what, they read Dazed and Confused, they read Hypebeast, they're super cool, edgy, like, you should also be reading The Voice, you should be reading Black Ballad, you should be reading The Times, you should be reading the gardening section, you should be doing every bit to get out. Like your media consumption should be wide and varied. You shouldn't just be following on Instagram everyone that you are personally interested in. You should be following some people that really piss you off. And you should do that for your own health as much as you should do it for creative excellence as well. It's like, see other people's lives and how they're living it, because you're not here to do a job for 30-something white blokes like you who like football and cricket.
Footy.
Yeah, yeah.
Not a fan.
God, it's like you know the nails on chalkboard. Footy is nails on chalkboard for me. Yeah, so it's like it just does me in. Like but
good to know.
But no, that's it. Be well read. Like it's and well read doesn't mean like.
So how does that work at Mischief? Do you, as a team, get all the papers out, sit around and read those?
Yeah, so we still do that like every morning. Like it's I don't think.
How does it work remotely?
So if you're in person, we try and do that in person. If you're not, it's like take a bit of personal responsibility. Go through. We're basically 3 days in, 2 days at home now. So it's you see it especially effectively when it's people gather around, and then there is.
So is it all the papers, magazines, just laid out, you're pouring over
bang. Like this looks interesting, and more often than not, like most, there will be the thing you've got to be a bit careful with papers is just like that's always yesterday's news. Like there's always something that's happened online that you need to be especially good at. So I sort of say like, look, if you're a creative and you don't have Twitter, I think you're an idiot, because like that's where people are going to talk about stuff. So if you think about what the device is, so Twitter's not as popular as it used to be. It's still where journalists hang though. Okay. And it's still where they talk about, it's where people talk about stuff and do hot takes on there. So it's really useful for that.
So the tips are get on Twitter, follow people you don't like.
Yeah, like just
dip into cultures that you don't normally.
Just diversify.
Join a village Facebook.
Yeah, join a village Facebook group is the most practical one. But it's like, diversify your list of media sources, and whenever you get a new, and that requires a commitment that really messes up like your algorithm. But you've got to do it, and it should be. It's like the simplest thing to do is match your clients. And so think about what it is that they're interested in, and then go through every
possible. So match your clients' target audience. Work out what that common ground is.
Work out what it is, and then like look, have special interests. It's like, why wouldn't you? It's like I said, I still like follow loads and loads of gardening stuff, because we did a gardening project with Ocado, and I became briefly obsessed with where the story would land, and then every now and then you'll see something fly up, and then that's come to fruition really nicely, because there was an idea we won for Chase, which is a gin brand from Diageo, and there is some work we're doing there which is all about being connected with the countryside. And by having these gardening things, I've got a really strong opinion on rewilding, which I didn't think I would have 3 months ago. And
for a boy from London.
I'm there like it turns out I quite want a bit more green, and like you're right, you've got a lovely plant behind you, but it's rest of us, man, like we're cutting up. But it's just find yourself just diversify your reading list, and you will be a better creative.
I love that. What do you think you'd be, Greg, if you weren't a creative?
Boxing promoter.
Yeah. Why is that?
Because I think I'd be really fucking good at it. Like I love puns. I think I've got enough, I know enough lawyers who would be really strong at it. And it's like the best boxers have narrative. And I think there are currently boxers out there who are not as popular as they should be, that I think I could make more popular, because you could
get the narrative right.
You get the narrative right. I'd give them a sick nickname and make them a bad boy. I'll give them like one-liners to say at press conferences, and it'd be really, really fun.
Yeah.
And I love boxing anyway. But I'm just I'm amazed at how little it's evolved. It's like Eddie Hearn has like really moved the game on. But even that is it's still an evolution of the same way of doing things. He's just done it a little bit better. Whereas I think you could go in and make boxing really, really interesting. And like it's just fun, man. I just think like that, or I would do something. I don't know if this is necessarily what I would do, but I've always I'm interested in politics. But the bit I'm interested in politics is that I'm obsessed with how they can't sound human, and I'm just like, I don't understand how you are representative of a population, and you're so determined not to sound like anyone I've ever heard of. Like it
in
boggles
terms of the way they answer questions.
yeah,
and
like
speak on.
but it's like Keir Starmer's a massive football fan, like genuinely a huge football fan, and you hear him talk about football, and you're like, I know you're a massive football fan. I've seen you play it. You've got a season ticket. Like you sound like an idiot. Like it's like Jeremy Corbyn, who like is like I'm a steadfast centrist, so Corbyn is like the Antichrist to me. It's like he spoke about football so well. Like he sounds like a football fan, and I think there is a role that you could do for politicians where you can just say like, I could bring you up to speed on the zeitgeist and just be like, come on, like let's just sound like a normal person. I think that would be fun. But yeah, boxing promoter, or I'd be a journalist. Like I always wanted to be a journalist, but I wanted to be like an investigative journalist, and no one's got the time or money for that anymore. So I was like, I love
We could do a little investigative documentary together.
Yeah, that'd be really fun. It would be like, well,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I'd investigate, but
Yeah.
I'd be bang up for investigating something.
Yeah. Sure. Something to do with rewilding.
Yeah, do rewilding.
Boxing and rewilding.
Could we rewild a boxing gym? Like, it's like a boxing ring, just go green
Yeah,
ring. Like the
boxing
first
wild, there's
eco-friendly
something
punch
there.
up.
Yeah.
Like Green Party versus Lib Dems in an all-round mashup. I'd watch it.
I know you've been somehow answering my questions before I've been asking them, so we're doing pretty well. Something that I do have down here is mentors. Have you got a mentor? Is it something you recommend?
I thought you said mentor. I was like, yeah, no, occasionally. Like, but it's like, yeah, like so I do mentoring, and I have had mentees. Like,
Okay.
I was really lucky. So when I've also just had really good bosses, and so like I was especially lucky at Mischief that my first boss there is Greg Jones, who was a creative director who became a managing director, and so I always for every time I've been at Mischief, I've always had that mentorship from a creative point of view from the person who's the very top of the business. And that's great.
And was that kind of structured, or was it more you kind of saw him, looked up to him? And
Yeah, like I think it was both. It wasn't by design. It just sort of happened. There are people I really look up to without doing formal mentorship. Like, so I think there's Joe Sinclair at the Romans, who I think I like the cut of his jib, and like I think the stuff he's done at the Romans is really impressive. I like how they think, and I like how they've got a great line of "We're bored of boring PR," which is I just think is a really good line. So yeah, I have like peers that I really like. There's a guy called Mark Perkins who works at Cal now, but has basically worked at every big PR agency. Who I always follow him because he's a persistent, like award-winning creative. Like wherever he goes, if he goes to a big agency, he'll win like big awards. If he goes to a smaller agency, he'll win like low-budget campaigns, and like he's just got a good, clean way of thinking, and so I like that going through.
So how's my phone going? How important is it to look over the fence at other agencies, what they're doing, what other creative directors are spinning out?
It's both valuable and completely pointless, sort of simultaneously. Sometimes, like it's like so valuable in the sense where you might see something. If you look at them as a collective, and you see like, right, is there a direction that we're missing? But like your ideas are dictated by your clients. It's like, so occasionally I get a bit jealous when I see someone getting away really banging ideas and I'm like, you have this feeling of, if I'd got that brief, I think I would have probably come up with something similar to that. But I'm currently dealing with like a big client that is doing like 3 months worth of planning going into something that is a global strategy. I don't get to do a quick win idea about it's just not there, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So you can both look at ideas and go, that's a cracking idea, but without it chewing you up, because I don't currently have the client list to facilitate that.
Yeah.
And then vice versa, I think you go the other way. So it can be completely pointless because you look at an idea, go, great idea, I couldn't have done that. There are some really helpful when you see ideas where you're like, oh, there seems to be a real thing at the moment for like, for example, like I've never seen more Ramadan campaigns this year than at any other point in my entire career. Like it feels like everyone started to notice that Eid Mubarak existed for the first time this year, and I thought that was quite interesting, and that's something that I'll be taking into next year. And being
So which brands did you see do something?
I saw Adidas do something. I thought it was like sports brands lead the way quite well, but it's just general marketing. Like I think I saw Tesco do an advert that was like It was like a Happy Eid advert, and you're just suddenly there, like I just hadn't seen that. Like you don't see that for Diwali, for example. I don't think at the same mainstream level, but there was. I thought that was interesting, and so it's really useful to see trends and to see what's picking up, and like also just to see what's picking up awards and what's winning. And so I love I love Taylor Herring's work because I think they are number one for stunt based stuff. And they've got a style, and I think it's a style that works really well, and it's like they're very visually arresting, and but they have the brands that accommodate it, and so when you do,
I guess it becomes self-fulfilling if you're known for that, then you get the right brands.
And there's a certain type of thing where like it's like I need to word this carefully so it doesn't sound like I'm mugging them off, but they have a brand that is so successful for them. It's like, why change? It's like so the thing that people will say about them is that they're stunty, and it's like, yeah, but their stunts are really good. So it's
what?
like,
Yeah.
so what sort of thing. And you're doing like a lot of their clients are publicity clients, right? So do publicity. Why would you're muggy if you don't, sort of thing. So yeah, I think the short answer is yes, it's really helpful to look, but like, you don't look in a sense of keeping up with the Joneses. You look to see, like, if I had a client like that, would I have thought like that? If I had a client like that, would I have done it like this? And I think that's really good.
What would you say is the dream brief to get, or is there such a thing?
There's a dream brief to you individually, but the dream briefs are the ones that are really well written. Like you know exactly what you're getting to. It's like my least favorite brief. You can have so if someone came to me with a boxing promotion brief, and it was a shambles, and you didn't know what the target audience was, that would be my least favorite brief, despite it being something that I'm really passionate about. I'd rather have a really clear direction. Like my favorite question to ask for a brief is like, right, what's an idea that you absolutely loved that had nothing to do with your brand at all? Because then you sort of get a sense for what the person's like, and you come through. But so I don't really have one, because I've worked, like, part of the reason I don't work in sports anymore is because I started to find it a bit boring. And sport is seasonal, and it goes round. And so like we were doing some amazing stuff for Under Armour and Anthony Joshua, and then it was just like, cool, now what do we do for another 3 months? Like it was quite hard to maintain that sort of always on, because it is so seasonal. And then you do something amazing again, and it was like, so now it's summertime, and what we're doing, like I found it a bit dull. So there's not a type of brief. I just think like you just know when you get a really good one. Like there's like we've just won. Am I now? If we're not allowed to say this, bleep
we
me.
can take it out.
Yeah,
okay.
but it's we've just won a Team GB account for the Olympics, and that was sick. And that came in, and that was like, it wasn't just like, yay, the Olympics, because I'm actually not that bothered about the Olympics. Of all the sports in there, it's there with golf for me. It's like, I care about it when it's a big one, otherwise I don't really care. But this brief was so clean and so well written, and it was like, I was under absolutely no illusions what the job was to do for us to win this. Was like, right, I reckon they're going to be speaking to sports agencies, so I know exactly, as Mischief is not a sport agency, how we pitch ourselves. We're going to go in as like, we are going to put you from back pages to front pages. It's like, we need these athletes to be famous, but not just at Olympic times. It's like, here are the ideas we think we could do it. And it's like, and it was just a supremely well written, well counselled brief as we went through. And like, so that's, yeah, I don't really care what the topic is, as long as it's really clear in what it does.
So give me top 3 tips for a client when they're writing a brief.
Ooh, good question.
What should be in it? Absolute musts.
So I'll start with what doesn't need to be in it, which is don't over audience. Like, so I hate pen portraits. It's like, our target audience is Jemima, who is this and does this and does this and does this, because literally nobody lives their life in one way. Like, I am both a dad and a massive boxing fan. It's like, if you just said this is aimed at 18 to 34-year-old dads, I'm 35. Like, it's just sort of like, does that mean it's not for me? It's like, in many ways, I think I'm younger than my 35, and in some ways, I'm like an old man. Like, don't over obsessed about the audience. It's a real basic point, because what you'll find is then you just get a load of people that gunning it like, this has to be Instagram, this has to be here. Most important thing is, what does success look like? So are we trying to shift sales, or are we trying to do a brand job, or trying to think that is the single most important thing, because it dictates everything. Because I might have an absolute blind of an idea for an awareness that delivers awareness, but it might not deliver engagement, and then it needs a technical thing to do that. So I think that what sort of success look like has to be really clear. And again, don't over commercialize that. Just sort of say, like, look, what does your boss's boss want to see? Which is ultimately how we all work, right? It's you can do something that was wildly popular and not wildly successful in terms of a commercial objective, but if your boss's boss loved it, it's wildly successful and it's done a job, and people will always find the numbers to make it work. And then I'm a big fan of examples of work that you loved and examples of work you hated. And that, for a creative, is just like, if you find one of your ideas skewing too much that way and one of your ideas skewing too much that way, it's wrong. And within that, it's just like, look, what's an idea you've been pitched a million times that you just don't like? What's the obvious thing to pitch you? And that's especially handy if you're dealing with really big brands, as Mischief does. It's like, what's the idea not to pitch? And so, like, look, we've worked with Lego now for coming up to the best part of 10 years. 7? I think say it's 7 years. But, and it's like, they would have been pitched by and I bet that they would have had ideas pitched to them by other agencies, and they'll be like, oh, why don't we do extra reinforced socks for Lego because it really hurts when you stand on them? And they're like, yeah, I mean, you could do, but that highlights a product negative, and like,
Yeah.
That sucks. Yeah, and we're a really elevated brand that talks about like the importance of play to children's development. So something like that will just be gimmicky, and it's not right for them. Even though I think in principle that is a really good idea because it's human insight. It's true. Like, I think you probably could get a Lego stocking that would be reinforced. Like, it's a good idea. It's not right for Lego because they are so above that. And things. So funny enough, we actually ended up doing a similar idea, but for comic relief. We had like Jacqueline Josser, instead of running over a wall of fire, doing fire walking, she ran over like Lego for charity, and like it works in that setting because it's deliberately funny and comic relief coming through. So that's a really important thing to ask the question, because you could accidentally get a client's back up through no fault of your own. But it's just like, what does success look like? What does your boss's boss want? I think is a really good question. And as I said, like, just ask human questions. Like, so I love it when you go on to all agency briefings, and especially if it's a competitive set, like people are desperately trying to ask the question that makes them sound the most intelligent. Like, don't ask that question. Ask the question that makes you sound a bit thick, because you have to know. And it's just sort of like especially when I work with some of the MHP guys, I am the person that asks the most questions. So I'm a bit like, right, I know what the big talking points are in retail and stuff like that. I don't know what the big talking points are in cryptocurrency at the moment. But like, if people keep on throwing around phrases like bear market, I have no idea what that means. Like, tell me. And so we'll go. And so I think you can ask your questions in a human way, not in a business way. And human way is like, look, who's on your case about this? Who do you need to impress? And if you've got a good client relationship, that question becomes one of the most important questions you can ask. It's like, you can do like something that could have delivered 100 sales, brilliant, it smashed everything. But if your client really wanted their CEO to be in the Times, deliver them CEO in the Times. Do you know what I mean? It's like, ask the questions in a human way is a good tip.
Good tips. Yeah. So, last question. Well, it's not really a question actually. It's more of a mini brief challenge if you're up for it.
I'm always game.
So
my day rate's coming up.
Good. It's a quick one. Is there a minute rate?
Yeah, go.
Okay. So, Creative Minds, this podcast.
Yeah.
If you were to PR it, come up with a stunt or a little PR hook or a big PR hook.
Yeah.
What would you go for?
Oh, good question.
Putting you on the spot.
So what are we? We're a podcast. We're basically providing ideas for BearJam. I think, well, are we doing something to PR the podcast, right?
PR the podcast, yeah.
Right, sweet. So in which case, I'm going to go, like, there's two stunty options here. We're in the heart of Shoreditch, Hoxton at the moment. I think you could do a giant brain, like make a massive brain, but make it super colourful and sparkly. And I think you go for a visual stunt if this is where creative happens. So above this building, there will be a brain, just literally a giant brain. Maybe you don't even say what the brain is for, and so people are like, what's the brain? and float it about a little bit. I think you've got to like that's very to the point on Creative Minds. I like literal. Like I think if you go hyper literal, it works.
Alexa, in-house design animation. She's working.
I thought you were going to say, Amazon assistant.
She's working on a logo for Creative Minds, and it does involve a big brain. So again,
I'm on brand already.
Yeah.
See, this is why you asked a human question. It's like, what do you want it to stand for? What do you want it to achieve?
Yeah, just world domination for me.
Right. Well, in which case, what we might need is you matched up in a James Bond villain vibe.
Okay. No, you had me at James Bond. Not a villain.
No, because he wants world domination. Bond's not bothered.
Yeah.
Like, so no, I mean, it's all that you keep it simple, right? Like it's a discussion about talking about creativity. Like I think you could go superficial on that.
Yeah.
All minds lead here. I mean, like purpose is everything at the moment. You might need to donate £1 for every listener to some sort of creative charity that helps minds. But no, like I think that's how I'd go. I think you go visual for that, something like this.
Yeah.
You are an entertainment. I would take a leaf out of the Taylor Herring playbook and be like, let's visualize what this is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, leave it with us.
Yeah. I think I want a giant brain. Let me know what the budget is.
Yeah. I'll find it. Yeah. We just got to source a giant brain now. But
No.
yeah, definitely not here.
I feel like Monday Greg could have given you one, but like Friday Greg.
Gregory's got the giant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, I think that's it.
Nice.
How was that?
Mate, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
Thanks for
Was
coming.
I good? Was I bad?